Hey guys, how's it going? It's Josh here with a new video, but today it's something a little different. It's not really a review, it's more of just like, I don't know, a conversation, an argument, I guess. I don't know. I really liked Velma. Like, I didn't think this is the greatest show ever or anything like that, but in terms of adult animated series, it stands head and shoulders above a bunch of other streaming services animated series. Now, I don't think it's as good as something like Smiling Friends or obviously, something like South Park that has had, such longevity and quality has remained, or even something that lasted not as long but still had quality throughout the entire runtime like Futurama. I don't think Velma comes close to the level of writing on those shows, the level of voice acting, the level of storytelling. Not at all, of course. I'm not saying it should be in the range of highly acclaimed animated series, especially adult animated series, considering all of the good ones. However, I don't think this is anywhere near as bad as something like Paradise PD. People could talk about the level of humor, the politics, the racial politics, the sociological. One of the biggest criticisms for the show is just the fact that it's inclusionary. The random race and character swaps that happens in this show. Admittedly, I think is forced, but almost it's like, at least to me, maybe this is just my interpretation of the show, or maybe this is the whole point of the show. It feels like that's the joke. All of the inclusionary, conversation and talking points, how even then the main characters themselves, despite being minorities of, any racial or sexual group or what have you, are still very much the inverts of what you would expect from casting stereotypical inclusionary roles like this. In fact, they go out of their way to make it such a point in the show that this is an inversion on stereotypes. I feel like there's a joke like that in every single episode, which me personally, I never care. I am among the belief that even if you were to do something as ridiculous as changing Black Panther's race to a white dude, I'm looking at the humor in that. I'm not looking to be outraged or, exasperated because somebody doesn't look like something that they're supposed to in a movie. I think the perfect example of this is probably any race change that has involved Giancarlo Esposito's character, or any sex change that worked out for the better. There are numerous examples that I will show on the screen that I feel like the sex change or race change either didn't do anything to the character, was the least amount of problems for the film or show that it was involved with, or added a layer of drama to the fact of the character, being swapped out for whatever it is. I feel like benefits the story in some cases. It's not something that I naturally encourage, but I do encourage changes from the source material. This being a change from Scooby-Doo, an animated cartoon series that has been spoofed, recreated, rebooted, remade, and adapted and changed in so many ways that I just don't think that there's any parameters on what should be or shouldn't be constituted as a Scooby-Doo show. It's about a group of kids that's doing a mystery, except they set this as a prequel before they become a team and before Scooby-Doo is involved. People are telling me that the continuity doesn't make sense because Shaggy was Scooby-Doo's owner even before he met the rest of the kids, and I ask you, what continuity? There are so many continuities in which we don't even know the origin of these characters and their relationships. Some are just assumed, some are spoken about in conversation, or some are displayed right on screen. We have no idea what is the single sole identity of Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Inc. gang, because there's been so many iterations across the history of time that who gives a fuck? I mean, Scooby-Doo doesn't even have a fan base that would be as dedicated to its original presentation as even something as Transformers or G.I. Joe. I remember a bunch of people being crazy upset that those characters didn't look or act like their original counterparts. Whereas with something with Scooby-Doo, there have been so many sequel series in which the characters have been changed, their personalities, origins, voice actors, setting, etc., animation style even, that no one cares. There's no allegiance to a source material that in which a franchise has never tried to follow to begin with. So this feeling of betrayal or change from the original storytelling scale and aspect of Scooby-Doo, I feel like is a bit crazy. If you look at a Scooby-Doo show, even as recent as Mystery Incorporated, it is incredibly dramatic and incredibly dark in comparison to something like What's New Scooby-Doo, which only came out a couple years earlier. The difference in tone is stark. However, it was a welcome change considering that the storytelling in the show overall, not just solving mysteries that were disconnected from one another each episode, but solving tiny mysteries that were umbrellaed by an even bigger one, was the biggest hook for the show. Even the relationships were different. Shaggy isn't normally paired with Velma, but in the show he was, and in fact they completely changed their personalities almost in a completely stark way from the original presentation of these two characters. It's kind of funny how you could say the same thing for this Velma character. In Mystery Incorporated, you could argue that Velma is kind of an asshole, and you could argue that Shaggy is a bit of a lazy piece of shit. These are two people in a toxic, counterintuitive relationship with one another, and it makes their relationship on screen kind of insufferable. But it's appreciated because it's a new added dynamic to the mystery and game. Now, one of the biggest arguments against this show is that the characters are insufferable. Shaggy isn't even Shaggy anymore. He's Norville, a black dude who's a nerd streamer who is actually kind of cool but incredibly geeky, and he lives in a world where geek culture for some reason hasn't been accepted yet. This show, I must admit, has a very dated presentation of geeks and nerds. Even in the media, geek culture like anime, manga, comic books, even Dungeons and Dragons and other tabletop RPGs like that have been introduced into the mainstream by Stranger Things. So it's really not that weird. He's really not that weird, but they treat him like such a weird character. And I think you could say that about pretty much everyone in this show, is that they really aren't that strange if you put them in the real world until they have their extreme cartoonish moments. But these are people who exist. It's just that the world that they're in feels stunted from like 2004, like an edgy, almost like an online skit type of humor of just overly edgy but in a liberal way. So I understand like where it gets annoying, because I feel like liberals on the internet are synonymous with just like annoying people who just want to include everything and everyone and everything, and if you're not with it, you're an enemy and you're going to get canceled. I feel like the reaction to the show is more so a reaction to that, because if you watch the show, criticism that I saw from guys like Playback and stuff like that saying that this show was just trying way too hard to be woke, I feel like missed the entire point of the wokeness in the show. They actively, literally in the show, make commentary on the fact that there are so many things that just have representation that is completely hollow. It's not even a major part of the show. The race aspect of any of these characters doesn't change anything in the show. And a lot of people will say, well, that's the issue. Why even introduce these characters if changing their race isn't going to be something that's brought up in the show? Like I said, I think that's the whole point. Nothing changes in this world because it's not about racism. It really doesn't fucking matter because nobody cares. No one in this show actually cares that someone is black or someone is gay or someone is this. It's more so just about how those things maybe play a part in the way it's displayed. But Velma and Daphne's relationship and the issue between them doesn't stem from the fact that they have issues with their sexuality, more so that they actually like each other, and the relationship that they have is strained already, so it plays a different kind of pressure to it. Same thing with like her attraction to Fred. She pretty much establishes that she's bisexual. Like, this is what I'm saying. None of the identity stuff is really an issue in this story. It's not even something that plays a part. No one's ever like, oh man, this sucks because I'm this. So I do believe that the biggest criticism that I would agree with is the show has a very regressive view on, I feel like, this style of storytelling, this mystery high school subgenre of media. It does have a very juvenile and regressive view of it. Mystery Incorporated and Velma is probably the most these characters have ever been developed in their history, maybe outside of the films. Let's not act like Scooby-Doo is this story that has transcended decades. People identify these characters because they're associated with mystery and a common trope in animation. We could talk about some of the animated movies being really good and, you know, them having like guest appearances and stuff like that, but the Scooby-Doo property being heralded the way it is today is kind of funny, considering we just let a whole bunch of shitty Scooby-Doo properties slide until we got to this, where we could identify the identities, the race, the sexuality, the what have you of this show. Now, like I said, I don't think this show is that great of an adult animation, but I would like to point in the direction of something that is also on HBO Max, which is actually a really good, if not, I would say great adult animated program on HBO Max, would have to be Harley Quinn. The Harley Quinn show is unironically one of the best Batman properties we've seen on television since the Batman on WB Kids. In all honesty, it kind of blows that show out of the water, just in terms of the character development, the writing, the jokes. The only thing that I feel like the show isn't really that good on is the animation, especially its last season. It features a woman-led property. The woman main character is in a gay relationship, and there's a lot of commentary on society and a lot of political commentary, a lot of sexual commentary, a lot of, just intersectional commentary that isn't lauded as being preachy. It isn't spotlighted as being just some representation of an identity. It's just kind of strange to me that people say that they want these properties to have that kind of commentary or that level of dialogue that is subtle enough to still have an effect on you and have it be woman-led or have LGBTQ elements into it. But no one speaks on it. No one is referring to this property as such. They just treat this idea that women-led properties that are well written or have LGBTQ representation or anything of that similar ilk of just representation, everything that has anything to do with that in film, in TV, just is terrible when Harley Quinn exists. And instead of trying to focus on the negative and hate watching and hate farming or enabling the hate farm that this show potentially was for HBO Max, considering the success that they saw from it and the amount of engagement, how about we engage with properties that actually are universally accepted as such from a smaller audience and engage in that and grow that audience? So shows that have well-written leads that happen to be a minority or a woman or anything of the sort get better, so the representation of said groups are represented better or treated better or lauded amongst stories that may not include them. And I thought Mindy Kaling, like I said, they changed her race, but she sounds like Velma. There's never a moment where I was listening to her, like if I listened with my eyes closed or even when I was watching it and I'm seeing that her pigment is darker, I never looked at her like, wow, that isn't Velma. I just thought of her as like, she's just a shitty Velma. Or they can't even understand the concept that this show, there's no hive canon to the Scooby-Doo franchise. It's all different. But if you like this video, or hey, if you completely disagree with this video but you stayed till then, thank you so much for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe. If you have your opinions on Velma, please let me know in the comment section, and I will see you later. Bye bye.